Kia ora Aotearoa, good evening and welcome to the Union Report, where we review the news week through the lens of industrial disputes with union leaders, commentators and politicians. Joining me tonight to review the week is National Campaign Coordinator with the Service and Food Workers Union, Newman, and the Issues Director for the Greens, former Alliance Party leader and former Cabinet Minister, Laila Harre. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, two huge current campaigns, asset sales and living wage, depend entirely on building union community alliances. How does the movement reach out and build these? Issue 2, living wage movements are well established in the UK and US. Should we be looking overseas at successful union community campaigning models? And Issue 3, inflation is down to 1%, but Consumer Price Index shows electricity, rentals and vegetables all costing more and hitting low-wage New Zealanders hardest. What are the solutions to New Zealand's cost of living issues? Plus, we'll wrap with a final thought, but let's start the show with Issue 1. Hundreds of thousands of signatures are being collected to start a referendum on asset sales, and the living wage movement is connecting with diverse communities to change the debate on social economics. Annie, why is the union movement becoming so involved in social justice issues?
Well, I think the union movement's always been involved in social justice issues to some extent. I think that the way we're looking to be involved in social justice issues through a living wage movement is slightly different. But the topics are often the same. So the things that we're concerned about are poverty and inequality, and those things are getting worse in New Zealand. So the Living Wage campaign is a way that we can bring a much wider audience together to call for something to be done about that, so that we lift the wages of the lowest paid workers in the country.
Do you think there would be a criticism that would say, look, shouldn't unions simply be focused on negotiating the best deal for their workers rather than all of this other periphery issue?
Negotiating the best deal is part of what unions do, and so they do need to maintain that focus. They've got members who pay fees, and one of the reasons they pay fees is that they want to see that service. But of course it's part of a bigger picture about what's happening to those workers, and one of the things that we really notice now is that it's very difficult to lift workers out of poverty just through bargaining across the table. That market method of setting wages doesn't work, and we need to see how else we can go about trying to lift those wages. So joining with communities and looking at different ways of working is part of that picture.
Well, Laila, the Greens have been the most successful party online using social media to connect with communities. How essential has social media become as a mechanism to reach out?
I think it's really important because so many people are connected into Facebook and Twitter and other forms of electronic engagement. But in my view, it's not a substitute for all community campaigning. Because in the end, people really grow in campaigns by working together in a collective way, by having a face-to-face conversation, by taking part in activities, and in a successful campaign by actually being part of brokering a solution to the issue that you have raised. So there's a lot that can be achieved, in particular in communicating with people about what's happening in a campaign through social media. But in my view, you know, signing a petition, asking somebody else to sign a petition, standing next to someone on a picket line, knocking on a door, are all, in the end, the most powerful things we can do to engage people in campaigns.
The Greens very behind the asset sale referendum at the moment. Is that being successful? How do you judge it?
I think it's been enormously successful. I mean, if we take the Green Party's effort on the campaign to date, we have over 2,500 volunteers now, party and non-party volunteers, who are going and asking their family, friends, workmates, social networks to sign the petition and to push for a referendum on the sales. And Labour are also organising, and the unions are beginning, you know, to really gravitate around the issue. So I think there's a lot of potential in that, but its success really depends on the context in which you're doing it, and with the current Waitangi Tribunal case, with the state of the world financial markets, I think that everything that's happening is increasing the political uncertainty for the government around the sale of our power companies and increasing the chance that we can actually stop this happening.
I haven't never seen a referendum pushed by anyone where the people are lining up to sign in the manner they are with asset sales. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, I think there's a real deep concern about both, you know, the decision to sell, but also the decision to sell these assets. This is our electricity generation system that's on the line here, and you know, it's our hydropower, it's our gas station, it's our geothermal resource, which is not only important for the economic survival and sustainability of New Zealand, but is also a potential base from which we could be developing fantastic modern industries and exporting technology and ideas by leveraging off these enormously successful companies. It's going to cost us money to sell these generators, and it's certainly going to cost us job opportunities down the line.
Annie, the living wage has 60 different community groups involved, from the Child Poverty Action Group through to St. Stephen's Presbyterian. How do you keep communities that diverse together?
Well, I think you have to have issues that matter for those communities, and probably going back to what Laila was saying at the beginning, you need to work with people and develop leaders and talk to them one-to-one, and yes, use social media, but I think we need to get out and actually be creating the connections between unions and communities around the things that really matter to them. Yeah. And we have a huge amount of interest in the Living Wage campaign, so I'm quite confident that if we apply some of those very basic principles of building good community organisation, that we can really be successful. We have people who are used to putting proposals up to synods, who are working through those formal channels around the Living Wage campaign, but who are prepared to go an extra mile because this is a really big issue for them. So I think that we've got the right issue, and it's about starting to work with people and build up leadership skills and opportunities where people can take action around what really matters to them.
How do you get the cross-community dialogue going? I mean, is it monthly meetings? Is it bi-monthly meetings? How do you, how does the mechanics work?
I think that there's a bit of a mixture of both, actually. We're doing some planning work both in Wellington and Auckland. I think events are really important because I think that they make people feel good about the organisation that they're part of. But I think that there needs to be a whole lot of hard graft of going out and sitting with people and listening to them and talking about how the Living Wage campaign can sit alongside the sorts of concerns that they have as an organisation.
Laila, David Parker last week gave a speech where he pointed out that electricity generation was not on a list of assets that Labor protected. How would that make those volunteers and community groups on the streets seeking signatures to stop energy asset sales feel? I mean, if you're going to involve the community, surely the political messaging needs to be on point.
Well, I can't speak for the Labor Party or David Parker, but I do think that he was misunderstood on that point. So my understanding is that Labor are clear that you know that the generation companies are not up for sale. Right. And they're certainly heavily invested in the campaign for a citizens-initiated referendum and are successfully collecting signatures. So, I mean, I don't have any doubt at all about their commitment on the issue. Okay,
so, but in terms of making sure you've got the political messaging right, that was a misstep, surely?
I can't comment on that.
Question to both of you. The last election saw the lowest voter turnout in 120 years. Are we seeing less civic involvement, and is that a threat to these types of community union alliances?
I think that that's why the community union alliances are really important, because I think that that's a process of politicising. When people start to find avenues to express their concerns and opportunities for their organisations to become involved, then you increase the number of people who can talk about issues and suddenly make the connections between their everyday lives and the decisions that are made either at a local government level or at a central government level. But that connection between people and policy is enormously important, and I think that's what I think the Living Wage campaign can be a vehicle for.
Is this an antidote to that apathy?
Totally. I mean, the more that people are given an opportunity to be engaged in real policy making and influencing government, local government, employers, whoever is in a position of authority or power, the more likely they are to participate in, you know, the politics of public policy through the electoral system. I mean, I think it is a really deep concern that people feel or felt in the last election that their vote wasn't critical, that they obviously weren't sufficiently inspired by alternatives on offer to come out and express a view on the future. And I mean, I think we're all in the business of trying to change that. But, you know, coming back to things like the living wage campaign, it seems to me entirely appropriate for unions to be leading on these issues, because, you know, unions' job is to defend the interests of working people and their families and communities. And we sort of have a saying, follow the money. So often now it is not the direct employer who has the financial power in the relationship. So a campaign that's aimed at the procurer of the service, government, local government, district health boards and so on, can be far more effective than a campaign that's just directed at the individual employer. And we can all influence that. I mean, government, local government, district health boards and others are big employers of people, and their policy around the kind of contracts they let has a huge impact on the basic wages of most low-income people in this country.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, the UK and the US have well-established living wage movements. What can we learn? Annie, you've been overseas recently and seen living wage movements. What are they doing right?
Well, one of the things that they're doing right is they are targeting the funders or the people who have the power to make decisions that will benefit those who are on the lowest earnings. So really picking up again what Laila was saying, London Citizens is a community alliance in London, and what it did when it kicked off its living wage campaign was it created a political assembly. And it put the Mayor of London, who in 2004, and one of the candidates was Ken Livingstone, put him on the stage, and it put a demand to him, and that was that council take some steps to address living wages in London. And in front of a couple of thousand people at that assembly, the Mayor or the Mayor-to-be said yes, and that made the difference. When he became the Mayor, he invested in a unit attached to the Greater London Council, and that unit still releases every year a living wage, which is the London living wage. So what they do really well is they bring together large numbers of people from communities. They bring together those people who have an interest in a particular issue, and they create an opportunity for them to present that issue to those who can make a difference and make a decision and deliver something. And so over and over again, they have been successful in getting decision makers to change policy, or if it's a big employer, to create a living wage business which benefits those at the bottom.
Laila, the living wage campaign started in the UK in 2001 and since then have won over £70 million on living wages by getting employers to sign up as living wage employers and then promoting that. Can conscious consumption be the catalyst, or does the minimum wage require state enforcement?
Well, both are important. I mean, obviously, you know, you want to have a mechanism for enforcing agreements, whether they're statutory or regulated or negotiated. But I think that that one thing we've underutilised in New Zealand is the power of the procurer to make a difference. And it's not just on wage issues, although, you know, that's obviously got lots of potential, which the Service and Food Workers Union and others are showing in the living wage campaign, but it's also around environmental standards and other conditions that you could set as a procurer of products or labour or whatever on those who you procure it from. So, you know, we don't have really any effective commitment from government in this country to buy New Zealand made products when it purchases on behalf of the government or local government or large enterprises. We could put a lot more pressure on there. Similarly, obviously, with with standards of living of workers. So, I mean, I think there is tons of potential for communities and consumers to influence the big financial sort of money holders in the system by demanding different conditions of contract.
Annie, the Living Wage campaign is funded primarily by the Trust of London. New Zealand seems to lack that type of philanthropy. Is that something that impedes New Zealand's living wage movement?
Well, London Citizens and Citizens UK has funding from all sorts of sources. A lot of foundations fund it, but unions fund it as well, and all the organisations who join it provide some degree of funding depending on their size. So money's obviously important, but I think that philanthropy is not everything. And in some ways this is a social justice issue. We want people to shift the way they procure. We want governments to shift the way they procure services. We want people to look at how they spend public funds. Those are issues that don't require philanthropy. They require influence and pressure. They require people coming together across a large range of organisations to speak with a common voice and a single voice about questions such as a living wage. So I think, philanthropy would be nice, and they have in fact funded the whole the foundation that determines what a living wage is in London through philanthropy. So if there are philanthropists listening, we would like money for that. But that's not really where the hard work comes in, I think, for the living wage movement.
So you would send an invite to Owen Glenn and Kim.com?
Yes, if they would like to fund, we would love to have them.
Laila, the focus in the US has been to protest for a living wage at publicly subsidised projects. Should the public sector lead by example or try and get the cheapest deal for public money?
It's not leading by example, it's developing a decent work environment for the citizens in the community. So there's nothing altruistic or generous about paying people enough money to live on. And so the public sector has an obligation, as does the private sector, to pay a fair living wage. It's the public sector that we can influence most directly because we're part of it as citizens. So yeah, I think the public sector should be doing it. There's nothing no morality there. It's just about, our power as citizens to say we want to live in a healthy community and we want to support good jobs.
Was that one of the big disappointments about the Ports of Auckland dispute? This was a publicly owned asset.
Yeah, it was a huge disappointment, and I think it's one of the real risks of the privatisation process with the power companies and with other public sector organisations, that you start to diminish the social responsibility requirements that exist, currently in legislation and so on that guide those companies.
Focus on question of both of you. Employers watching this will be yelling they can't afford to do business now. In a global recession, do we have the money for a living wage?
I don't think that this is about employers not having money. Some employers won't have money. The living wage campaigns target those who have money, who voluntarily decide to do it, or those that can be influenced through the power of communities and unions coming together. But I think that, we've got a very interesting example at the moment with Aranui Rest Home in Auckland, where those workers are on strike and they've been told, most of them are on $13.50 an hour, which is the minimum wage, and they've been told by the employer that it is not the money that's stopping him paying them an increase. The reason why he's not paying them an increase is that they've been there for 10 years and more and they're not going anywhere, so why should he? So it's that kind of stupidity and attitude that this campaign needs to confront. He has the money to pay it. He's choosing not to. And I think ultimately poverty doesn't benefit anybody in the society, whether they're wealthy or not. So there's an important message there for middle New Zealand as well as for the unions and communities and politicians.
We can't not afford to raise it? Would that be the counter?
Well, all the evidence from all industrialised countries clearly points to healthier, societies where we have a narrower gap between the wealthiest and the poorest in the society, and there really isn't any contest about that anymore. So the issue is what tools you have to narrow the wealth gap, and one of the tools is good purchasing and employment sort of policies in the government sector and in large private enterprise, which is really what drives the market, the labour market. Are the big players.
Are you disappointed or surprised, or maybe a mix of both, that the government doesn't seem to have any strategy whatsoever to actually bring that gap between the rich and the poor closer together? I mean, we seem to have seen inequality raise in New Zealand since National got it.
Well, we have, and one wonders how closely they've looked at the evidence and whether it's important to them to sort of promote a generally healthier and lower sort of crime, more safe society. But I mean, the evidence is really very, very clear.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, inflation is down to 1%, but consumer price index shows electricity, rentals and vegetables all costing more and hitting low-wage New Zealanders hardest. What are the solutions to New Zealand's cost of living issues? Annie, inflation is 1%. Do workers have much to celebrate?
Well, 1% is not necessarily on the issues or the items that are most important for workers who are on low incomes. So the items that go up around things like housing costs do matter for them. So I'm not sure that it helps to create a 1% average and talk about that being an advantage for low-paid workers. I think also it really emphasises the importance of talking about need when it comes to what workers should have in their pockets. I think it's not about trying to negotiate a CPI or inflation-based increase. I think it's about saying workers cannot live on the money that they are getting at the moment when they are on those sort of low wages. We need a different way of thinking about this. We need people to take responsibility for the fact that workers work all week and they do a hard job and then they live in poverty. We've got a problem with it, and so I think it's a good opportunity to shift the debate at the bargaining table away from a 1% or CPI increase and onto something which is more about what the responsibilities of that employer are to ensuring people don't live in poverty.
Laila, is this the legacy of our low-wage economy? Because even though inflation is only 1%, workers' wages are so low to begin with, any increase hurts. I mean, in real terms, wages are lower now than they were in 2009.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a continuous erosion of the real buying power of the wage. And the Council of Trade Unions this week released, further figures showing, how deeply eroded the real value of incomes is. But also we need to look behind that figure. The reason that inflation is, probably at a record low is that we have a suppression of consumer demand in the economy, and that's because we are, people are losing jobs because wages haven't increased, because people are hanging on to money rather than spending out of fear about the future.
They can't afford to be consumers.
That's right. So, or they're too scared because the future feels so uncertain and so unpredictable that people are saving what they can rather than spending. So although, it might represent something of a hiatus in terms of massive increases in living costs, although as Annie says, of course, it's not all living costs at 1%. It really reflects a pretty sad state of the economy, given that our whole economic system is now based on the suppression of inflation. We're now well below what was already a ridiculously low target of 2%, and that's really a sign that the economy's in real trouble.
Final question to both of you on this. Does our low wage gap make the transition to a living wage more urgent or more difficult? Or we're coming from such a low base.
Well, I think that the gap is about the accumulation of wealth at the top, as well as the suppression of wages at the bottom. And I think that that one thing we do rightfully challenge is why some people have so much. But I think that the living wage campaign is about saying, why do those at the bottom have so little? And so by addressing that and focusing on trying to lift wages at the bottom, there is a contribution to reducing that gap. It's not going to do it all, but it's part of the picture. And I think that that's also what's important about the approach that we're taking. It's only one of many things that has to happen in a society that has reached the kind of crisis, if you like, that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, we're at crisis point?
In lots of ways, yes. I think that there's, I mean, where are new jobs coming from? It feels like a crisis to me when you don't have any sense at all of where the growth is going to be in potential job opportunities. That is going to continue to drive down wages. You know, it becomes a buyer's market, an employer's market for labour. I've been sort of working a bit with a young person recently who has been out there looking for a job as a fully qualified tradesperson, has completed his apprenticeship, and every job is several days trial for no money, and then offered $15 an hour. And you know, these are qualified tradespeople who are desperate to get a foot in the door, and who are being offered, you know, barely more than the minimum wage for the many years of training and experience that they've got. So, you know, I think the real crisis is the sense of, the lack of a sense of a growing workforce and increased jobs to be available for our increasing number of people leaving school or re-entering the workforce.
It certainly says something about the state we're in when the government seems to only hold up building gambling convention centres as the way to go forward, doesn't it? Thank you, panel. Let's wrap the show with a final word. Laila, your final word this week is?
I would like to see the trade unions really putting the effort in over the next few weeks to getting workers in unionised workplaces, whether they're union members or not, to sign the petition to call for a referendum on the asset sales issue. I think realistically we have probably until about September, October to collect enough signatures to force the government to have to confront the timing of a referendum. And we could still get this done before the first asset Mighty River sale Mighty River Power goes on the market for sale. So the unions are the key to this now. I think the political parties have done a lot. And have certainly done our fair share. We need to get that 100,000 signatures that the trade unions committed to delivering, and it would be great to see some more work done there.
Annie, your final word this week?
I think unions have a lot of power to make a difference to bigger issues of social justice such as poverty. I think communities also have a power to make that difference as well. And I think bringing those two forces together could really transform low wages for New Zealanders. So I'd like to think that communities and unions came on board with this and tried to create something slightly different as one way in which we can address growing poverty and inequality in New Zealand. And we have a good website, so people can go to their website on www.livingwagenz.org.nz and say that they would like to be involved.
It's an excellent site. Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Laila. That's it for the show. Check out our Facebook site for ongoing union campaigns and actions, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter account for all the latest show updates. Thank you for watching Aotearoa. Join us again 8 PM next Monday for the Union Report here on Triangle TV, the home of original public broadcasting. Good night, New Zealand.